Good to go.
Good to go. Okay, welcome to Cloud Foundry Community Advisory Board meeting. A short one today, I think, for November the 18th. A small group of people together. Welcome, everyone. Let's get started with the Cloud Foundry Foundation updates. Chris, anything to report?
Hey, everybody. No, nothing in particular. Chip is here. I don't know if you have anything to add, Chip.
Yeah. So we just shared earlier in the week that there's a kind of a redesign of the technical governance for the purpose of like how decisions are made in the projects, what projects are formed, all that good stuff happening. There's been a small working group from the four member companies who represent about 95% of the contributions to the project. That's been kind of working over the last couple of months. That said, it's a bit of a straw man, and starting in 2 weeks, because here in the U.S., there's we're going to try to thread the needle a little bit and have the first version of this meeting that is open to anyone with any interest whatsoever to come and join. So if you look at the community calendar, let's see, 3 Fridays from now, you'll see that there's an invite to join that effort. There was a repo in the Cloud Foundry org called Community that's gone from private to public. It is, as the H1 heading on the README says, a work in progress. So take absolutely nothing in there as anything other than the current straw man. But everyone's welcome to participate. Should be a good time.
Thank you. I'm going to drop the link in the agenda doc so that people can find it. Yeah, just connect that to what I was saying earlier. We can, after the updates, I want to talk a little bit about conformance-based certification and tie that into, I want to get some more people, some more eyes on it from a smaller group before we send it out to the whole organization. PMC updates. Sorry, Chip, was that all from the foundation, or?
Yeah, I think that's all right now. I would also say that keep an eye out if you're a contributor to the project. I think in early December, Chris will probably hold on this until early December. We're going to send out a survey to anyone who's contributing to the project in any way. We want to kind of get a sense of how things are going. Get your read on what the foundation could do to support the technical community better, but I think more importantly, what suggestions you might have for the technical community itself that you're part of, in order to support each other. So keep an eye out for that. We'd love to collect all that feedback and then make sure we reflect that back to all of you.
Awesome.
And that's it.
Thanks, Chip. Questions for Chip?
Look, Chris, we're doing the hands-on lab in December.
Yeah, for CF Protect. Yeah, I believe James is on vacation at the moment. He was going to get us some copy for that, but we have a tentative date, which is not fresh in my mind. But yes, we will be running the CF Protect hands-on lab in December at some point.
Okay. Moving on to the PMCs. App runtime, thank you for the written update. Do you want to run through them for us, Eric?
Yeah, happy to do that, Troy. So on the Relent side, they've had a couple of quick releases of CF deployment to deal with some certificate regeneration issues that I believe the latest version of Golang is requiring in terms of how it verifies certificates. So watch out for those. I don't think that they should introduce any major complications. We're just making sure that those certificates are appropriately generated for Golang to interact with them. And then on the CF4Kate side, they've been continuing work on both a track for some more standardized image management and more sophisticated management of secrets in the configuration there. And then kubectf has had another minor version release of 2.6, and I believe they're investigating what it'd be like to integrate some of the KPAC-based staging mechanisms that we've had in CF for Kids into kubectf as well, which sounds great. On some of the component team fronts, I know the CAPI team and the Services API team have requested comment on what is the final stretch of the v3 API endpoints and corresponding v7 CFCLI commands. These are all for various service management and service binding interactions. Irini's also continued working on support for sidecar processes, and they're continuing work on their LRP CRD. And they're also streamlining and simplifying some of their templating, which I think they're planning in preparation for a 2.0 version because there might be some breaking changes to the configuration there. And then networking is continuing on track of work around more flexible pluggability of other ingress routing and networking systems, focusing on Contour as a lighter weight option alternative to Istio. And then logging and metrics has been continuing work on improving log cache performance and scalability.
Thank you,
Anyway,
sir.
I think that's about it. Happy to take any questions or talk about any of that to the extent that I know about it.
Changes in the Irini team, I heard a bit of. No? Okay.
I know we've been doing some reorganization on the VMware side across a lot of our teams. So I think there's been a little turbulence from that, but as far as I know, we're still staffing people on that team.
Okay, no, I thought, was it this span, is Jules is still leading it?
Oh,
Jules
yeah,
Friedman?
here Jules, yeah.
Here
No,
Jules.
actually, here Jules is now the project lead
That's right.
for the team, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone was aware of that, but that,
Yeah.
that we've changed Jules's for Irini.
Right, yeah.
Bosch PMC, Kevin, do you have any updates? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off questions, by the way. Anything else for Eric? Thank you for those updates. Thank you.
Actually, they're checking if there is someone else from the Bosch team. I'm actually on a different project now.
Okay.
So
that's all right. I'll chase up some Bosch updates on Slack if we don't have anyone here. And for extensions, the only update I have, I will have more after the next extensions PMC meeting. But yeah, Stratos 4.3 release, mostly bug fixes and some back-end work. Let me quickly call up the release notes. To see what that was, I should know it off the top of my head. I don't think it was a lot of huge stuff. List filters, some work on the Helm chart list, some styling and coloring thing for the dark theme, I think, and a bunch of bug fixes. So congrats to that team. But that's the only thing I have. For open discussion, I just want to introduce this document I started at Yui's, well, not at Yui's request. It's something I've been talking with Yui about for a while. And she said, you know, you really got to get this started, and because no one else is going to float this. So I'm going to drop a link here in the Google Doc link for something I will share once I've had some more eyes on it with CF Dev, conformance-based CF certification. So I talked a little bit about this in Philadelphia in the CF Kubernetes panel, that we, as we move away from the traditional VM-based CF deployment release, and we have now 2 different Kubernetes implementations, the ship this code model of the certification process for Cloud Foundry certified releases distributions is going to be more difficult because we would just have to keep adding different optional pieces of code in order to sort of guarantee this roughly the same user experience. It would be much better to define that user experience by way of something that tests the API, like Cloud Foundry acceptance tests. So what I'm proposing here is that we start with CATS, the current Cloud Foundry acceptance test suite, as a point for if a distribution of Cloud Foundry passes either all of the Cloud Foundry acceptance tests or a designated subset, or a designated subset plus some additional tests, that it should be considered certifiable. So that those are that it would pass the technical requirements. Now this has some interesting side effects, and it maybe is different from the original goal of Cloud Foundry certification. And feel free, anybody, to jump in and correct me or offer a different point of view. But I believe something I refer to as the exact software requirement, which is just borrowing some of the wording from the certification requirements. I believe the exact software requirements were designed to encourage people to all contribute to the same code base, so that maintenance load was shared rather than having each company working on forks of Cloud Foundry. So it was designed to bring the companies together to actually, like, initially or certainly historically, to pair on the software, but also to make sure that the code base was homogeneous. I think now that we already have two converging, diverging, parallel, I will say, projects for CF on Kubernetes, it's time to really look at opening things much wider. That is, if we were to go towards an API-driven conformance test like Kubernetes has, we could have certain components of CF be radically re-implemented and still provide the same interface to end users, and potentially, if we want to define this, provide the same interfaces internally within Cloud Foundry on a component by component basis. Now that part of this, there's a lot of to-dos in my document here, so please understand I'm sharing a very early version of this in hopes that other people might contribute. But this would be a different, the end result might be a bit different. We might have many implementations growing for either components or entire distributions of Cloud Foundry. But I thought I'd put this out there. From SUSE's perspective, we would really like to have the freedom to innovate and still have a distribution of Cloud Foundry which is certifiable. So that's the motivation from me and from some of my colleagues. Open it up for thoughts generally on a conformance-based, more similar to the Kubernetes model, test framework for certification. Chip, I saw you mentioning something in the GitHub issue where I raised this.
Yeah, that was well, I actually brought you in to raise it. The first thing I mentioned was that, you know, we want to rework the way technical governance operates, right? And so the straw man proposal is that we sort of reconstitute, instead of having a PMC council with PMCs with projects, it kind of gets reshuffled around and it becomes a TOC with a bunch of working groups. So my suggestion in order of operations here is, we don't need to rush to do an update for 2021. Let's sort out how we're going to make decisions as a community. And then if that straw man is roughly what's going to happen, let's stand that thing up, and then let's make deciding about exactly, you know, maybe approving the final approach to the way CERT should work going forward. in that
Yes.
POC body, right? So that was the right repo to toss that that idea into. So Guillaume from Orange added it there, which is awesome. And then I think that issue basically ends up being one of the early things that ATOC would take on in early 2021. So at the same time, the fact that you're sharing this now is awesome, Troy, because I do think people should start thinking about it. If we wait to start to formulate plans or approach, then it means that won't actually be the thing that changes until, you know, the summer or later. So it's good to do some things in parallel.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is very much a work in progress, and I'm looking to get eyes outside of SUSE on this as well, so that we have something fairly fully fleshed out to present to the new governance body to make a decision on. So we've got some consensus in the community already about what it means to be a Cloud Foundry distribution, what Cloud Foundry is. A lot credit to, and I'm just blanking on his name, Stark and Wayne unconference presentation. Cloud Foundry is dead. Long live Cloud Foundry.
James Hunt.
James, yeah, who was on the last CAB call as well. His presentation sort of kicked off like, okay, other people feel this way, that what Cloud Foundry really is the experience. And especially because it's changing so much right now and it's changed over time, the thing that is most important is preserving the amazing feeling you get when you use Cloud Foundry and somewhat of the workflow that has been established at so many companies of people who use this day to day, and then allow for more freedom on the implementation side, because there's been a lot of innovation, I know, from other companies that have re-implemented parts of Cloud Foundry, and they just sit in a private fork somewhere because it doesn't really make sense for them to bring it into the Cloud Foundry community because it wouldn't ever fit in a certified distribution. So part of this is me thinking about revitalizing also the extensions PMC, and if there's some overlap there, but I really think this is the way to go. I know a lot of my SUSE colleagues feel the same way. So any of you on this call, please ping me on Slack. I can add you as an editor to this document. Anyone can comment on it, so feel free to do that. But if you want to help me work through these ideas, just hit me up on Slack and we'll open it up. Any questions about it?
I think our experience have been using, we use the CAT stuff to help validate some of our deployments of code as well for clients, but I don't think it's at the level that I would call a certification level at all.
Yeah, this is feedback I've gotten from SUSE developers as well. So we would need to replace some of CATs or use that as a starting point, but it would require, in some areas, more rigor, and in other areas, we would just leave out parts that are very specific to certain internal implementations. I know there's certainly Diego-specific CATs, which wouldn't really apply to Irene. I think this was some of the reason they turned off some of those tests. So yeah, and that's where I really need help, because I'm not familiar enough with the Cloud Foundry acceptance tests, running them myself, to know what they're exercising. So I've got some help on the SUSE side to go through these, but anyone else who's interested to identify, because that's where the hard work is going to be, is actually making the test suite and creating something that's a viable conformance suite of tests. So
I think the major lacking is, I look at the CATs as being more of a unit testing more than anything else.
Yep.
From that standpoint, there are some integration tests, but it doesn't take it from the angle of the end user or the user. And if you want to do certification, you want to make sure, and you're trying to validate the user experience, then it should be done from a user experience point of view. And I don't believe CATS does that from that standpoint. As you said,
Actually, Norm, I don't really understand that because it's exercising the CF-CLI commands end to end.
Yeah.
it exercises the commands, but it doesn't exercise the commands in the order of things, how things get accomplished. It's kind of like a single stack. You said, okay, this worked, but you don't have anything that does, you got stuff that goes depth, but nothing in the breadth angles. And so there's just not enough testing in there, in my opinion, that, does it combine together segmentation groups along with trying to make sure routing works and all this other stuff. Everything seems to be isolated, and you can run stuff and you really don't know exactly how all the pieces fit. And so I think there's a different way of looking at how the tests should run. And then I think that will allow you to change the tests to be more certified. Do you know that you can run 1,000 users or stuff like that? It's not designed for that. It's really designed for functionality. At least that's the way I look at it.
Right, but I think that's, I mean, we should, we've mentioned well, one, I want to say I love this direction. I think this is a great direction to go in. I'm very encouraged by this. Thank you for putting this together, Troy. I've long had this on my to-do list to promote as well. So I'm glad to see it materialize for sure.
I'll give you edit rights.
I think maybe it is useful to look at the scope of conformance testing that that Kubernetes has and what they found useful in their community. Is that primarily functional testing? Is there scale or performance testing there as well? And these could all be different areas. We don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
But from my perspective, starting from CATS as still representing that end-to-end flow for a particular user, usually the application developer using the platform, is a good starting point. But I agree that there is a lot of work to do there to make it comprehensive enough to serve as some sort of certification requirement.
Something else that just occurred to me, and I don't know how much work it would, well, probably a lot of work to, backing up. The Cloud Foundry Certified Developer exam is based on a bunch of code that defines how a Cloud Foundry developer should use, or what a Cloud Foundry developer should know to use the platform. It's been a long time since I participated in that, but I think some of those tests of the developer could actually form a basis for additional tests of workflows through a Cloud Foundry system.
They could, but I would be cautious to say that they are less specific than I even think that the CATS suite is, right? So remember, the approach for how do you verify the skills of an individual is that you think about what are the points of knowledge that someone has to have in their head, right, easily accessible, in order to define them as being an expert in using something. And I think that's a very different intention from how does how do you look at conformance of API implementation relative to two downstream distributions, right? Because there are a ton of features that are not tested for in the developer certification, and they shouldn't be because they're less commonly used, but they might very easily be worthwhile to check for conformance between distros.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, I've forgotten how much detail there is on the back end of how those test questions are defined.
Well, the other thing that I would say, Troy, is that those are not going to be publicly available because there's a
right. Then everyone would ace their Cloud Foundry certified developer.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
You could just automate it. It'd be great.
Well, all the verification is automated, but we can't let that code become a public open source.
Oh
asset.
my goodness, I totally didn't think of that. This is why I'm not a teacher. Okay, what about the idea of different categories or tiers of conformance. That is, you could get a conformance. So it's not a pass or fail, it's a percentage conformance. Or and this is what I'm thinking, is we have a core set, which is pass or fail. And then other areas, for example, routing. If a distribution didn't want to implement TCP routing or wanted to implement it differently, could that be outside of the core, what's called the core functionality?
So I'm 100% behind a core, which should be centered around the developer experience, and then a, sort of like a feature group or vertical of features, like, if you care about this stuff, then here's the scores in the respective departments, but they're not necessary to satisfy what is the core experience of Cloud Foundry. So, and the core experience of Cloud Foundry should obviously be the CF/CLI based stuff plus build packs, score, right? Which unfortunately right now CF for Kates would probably not score too well in that area, but they're coming along nicely. For example, right? Like, so that I would say I am 100% behind that approach of the core. They nailed the experience plus, if you care about these verticals or whatever word you're going to use, feature set groups, like.
Yeah, and there are some fairly well understood categories of that. I think there's container to container networking. Not everyone does, or not everyone uses, I should say. What else? The build packs there's a lot of divergence in build packs between distributions.
True, there is a lot of divergence, but there's some core expectations on the user's part, and that's usually like not necessarily about which build packs are fully available out of the box, but can I bring my own build pack?
That's absolutely crucial.
If you bring your own build pack, pass. If you cannot, then here's the rating, like, or whatever.
And I do think it was smart to leave the build packs out of the current certification for that reason, because people do have very specific requirements, and often fork build packs to do something.
Yeah, I can honestly say that very few clients of ours have ever not used the bring your own build pack feature. Period.
Good. Yeah.
So it's like the number one thing is like.
Yeah, and now, do you think that's going to carry on, or even there'll be more proliferation? With
honestly, yes, I feel it's going to not only carry on for needing that feature, but I think like today we can turn on for Cloud Foundry the either use build packs approach or run Docker container images approach, and I think that but still can maintain the CF developer experience. In the future, I foresee, especially on top of Kubernetes, like being, supporting both directions is going to be very important. But the bring your own is the most critical thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Again, that's just my opinion based on what we've seen so far.
No, that's excellent feedback.
Yeah, and the score actually has a nice side effect. If you can sort of say, here is the core of Cloud Foundry, these 5 items out of 10. Here is, team-based Cloud Foundry, 6 items out of 10. Here is, for lack of a better word, enterprise Cloud Foundry, 9 out of 10. Because I've always been advocating, smaller footprint. So being able to say you can still be conformant without feature A, B, and C, maybe a lightweight component swapped in. It's very good for smaller companies. For the
it's something we're looking at as well, and it's something that's been on my mind. The reason I really like CF Local is because there is a great use case for developers. So just using pack or on its own, or CF Local allows you to check that your staging is going to work locally. So the tightest loop of the iterative process with your app can happen on your own machine. And once that's nailed down, then you move to pushing it to a real PAS, wherever that might be on your local server, or you're even in a small footprint CF on your local machine. But that ability to scale down the essence of CF for a developer to work with locally would be great. And what that would mean is that would be maybe an authless or an orgless CF, or something with just a single user CF.
Yep, perfect.
And there would be a whole chunk of the cats that would not pass for that. And that would have to be a special case. And maybe that kind of thing doesn't have to be certified. That's maybe we could leave that out of the certification process, and that's just, a nice tool that you use to check that your stuff is going to deploy okay to CF.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said is sort of the crux of it, right? Effectively, turn this sort of certification thing into a tool such that companies can say, these are the things I care about, rate and give me a score, right? Or what's the score for these things? And then they can go based on their business needs versus just in general. Because if we have a one system, it's not going to work so well, because, oh, it scored 60%, except that you don't know that percentage is all you care about, so you're good.
Yeah, so something that was floated around is the idea of a matrix where you can actually just, so this is the suites, these, and we wouldn't do it test. We could, you could always expose test by test what passes and fails. You could have like a score sheet that people could read, but I think people need groups, like some logical groupings of those tests. So
yep, sounds fantastic. Sorry, I did join late. I was on another call.
No, you caught it right as we were getting into it. So it's kind of where we're going with this.
Troy, it's almost like a behavioral test suite in some ways, what you're looking for. You're looking for this behavior.
Yeah. I mean, we do want the correct response to an API call, so that we know that if you use the client, it's going to behave the right way. Or if you're implementing a new client, it's going to behave the right way.
Right.
Do we include both V2 and V3? Is another thing that I'm curious about.
So, due to where we are at that's a loaded question, and I normally I would say no, just do V3, focus on the future moving forward. This is a new effort, this sort of a new change. Just go with that. The problem is, I think that we're in a state where the V2 and V3 is like incomplete, is it not? Like we've got some drift between what works on. Kevin, isn't it something you guys discovered? Like we've got some drift on V6 CLI versus V7 CLI, and what's supported V2, V3 is like there's something, it's not quite there yet. No, Kevin's not here. Anyways, I could be wrong, but effectively, I would definitely vote for focus on the future, V3 forward.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Minimize the effort.
I would say that the V2 interface is many of the V3 interfaces are almost in place now. That most of the things have a replacement. There's still a few things that are not. That's still in the V2.
Yeah.
The worst thing we have right now is that when people try to use the V2 CLI and V3 and vice versa, flip it around, the world falls apart, and that's unfortunate.
Better with the latest releases. You can go back and forth more easily now.
Okay.
That's because we found that as well, but the very latest releases of both V6 and V7 seem to not be so bad. I haven't done it all. I just know that there's a lot of people in the world that are still on the V2 API using the V6 client. They have a lot of tooling in place that they don't want to necessarily move right away.
That is true, but isn't the spirit of this, like, as we move into this new world of like a
Yeah,
lot of
true.
Kubernetes-based implementations, how compatible are they? I mean, isn't that more of the concern? So therefore, V3 would make the most sense. I don't know.
I think you're right.
Also, if you wanted to go backwards in time, you could, right? If you got the V3 stuff, then you could say, okay, how does it map back, right?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there are a few things done in V3 a little bit differently than in V2. So it's not, it's sort of a change in the workflow but maybe it would be just simple to have in the matrix, V3 compatibility, and then another one for V2 optional V2 compatibility.
Maybe I can give some feedback from SAP side. We have actually gone through this exercise to switch from CF/CLI version 6 to version 7 for all our internal installation, or let's say for the bigger part of it. And that was actually not a big deal. I mean, if somebody, let's say, programs against the CLI, it's anyway broken, but those scripted stuff was not so much of a problem. Those colleagues who really implement against the V2 API and now have to migrate to V3, they have some more work to do, especially where synchronous calls switch to asynchronous calls. And the biggest problems that we have is that, let's say, the V3 API still has here and there some bugs, and there are some really nasty bugs inside. So race conditions, and I guess it will take another half a year or so until all these things are gone actually, and you get the stability back. So let's say 0.5% of CF push availability is gone if you switch from monitoring from CF6 to CF7 on a loaded landscape. Just to give you some data.
Oh my goodness, that's not good. So part of this
are
is
open, and the CAPI team is actually looking into it. But these are tricky things. It's not the easy bugs. They are all found and fixed, probably by cats and other things. But it's the delicate things. So yeah.
That is very useful information, though.
Yeah, but I mean, also, I think we should push to get these bugs fixed faster than 6 months, right? Especially if they're things people are going to hit in the wild.
Yeah.
You've probably done a very exhaustive testing to find these things. Hopefully, they're more edge cases, even if they're nasty. But
we will see. Yeah. At the end of the day, you find them all on big landscapes.
Right.
Sooner or later.
Troy, I was just reminded in the background that effectively the thing that was coming to mind for me is that our last round of evaluating CF for Kates, it really only was supporting the V7 CLI API basically, and no support any longer for CAPI V2 calls.
Right.
And what the struggle there for us was that the current implementation of Stratos would not work because of that.
Exactly. That's on their roadmap, FYI. But again, it's not there. Stratos is going to have to support both.
Yep. So effectively, I think that from this discussion and whatever everybody's saying, my recommendation would definitely be, let's just do future looking for this particular effort and say it's going to be for V3, and
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. I think it's a way forward. Whatever can you do? What would help, for instance, is also when you bring out a real deprecation plan for V2. That's one of the most asked questions that I get. Is V2 still available or not? And then you say, well, yeah, it's not yet officially deprecated, but the resources have already in the documentation a deprecation mark. You should use V3. We could recommend V3. CF/CLI version 6 is deprecated, at least on our landscapes, because we have recent CF deployment versions inside where it's not supported officially anymore. It's still working, and sometimes even better than the CF7. So that's too much talking. I mean, if you have here a clear statement, mid of next year, V2 will be gone. Time is ticking, please migrate. That's something that everybody understands, and where then also people will start to work. If you explain that much of story, then everybody will say, okay, got the message, I will wait. that's what happens.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion. Give them a reason to care and move and close the gap.
Yeah.
Capture some notes here. Okay. Has anyone else got any topics for discussion today that otherwise we can call it early and get back 20 minutes or so? Does anyone want to help with this document? Does anyone want edit rights? Okay, thanks, Norm. I'll ping you. Sorry, anyone else?
Hey, Troy, this is Ram.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let folks know that there's a couple of hands-on labs, the Tri-CF one, which is very introductory, scheduled for early December, one in the first week and one in the second week. So one of the things that we're trying to do is schedule this in time slots that are more friendly in the APAC and in the EU/Africa/Middle East regions. So
Okay.
if there's folks that you know who are in these regions who might be interested in an introductory CF hands-on thing, do pass on the word.
Chris, is this the one that you were mentioning earlier, the hands-on labs that you guys were talking about?
No, actually, we're running the two Tri-CF labs, as Ram said, in Europe, Asia friendly times, and then we've also got a hands-on lab from Stark and Wayne, the CF Protect, which James demoed on the cab call last time, which is a pretty cool project. So we've got all those coming up in December.
So that's Tri-CF, and have you, Ram, have you put something in CF Dev about that, or the CF users, a mailing list or something? Where can people find more information? Or
so there's a link to like registration page on cloudfoundry.org. I'll send you the link to that in a bit.
Okay, I'll add it to the notes here. So everyone, if you know someone in those time zones, those regions, please evangelize this and make it known that there's some Tri-CF courses in first and second week of December. Thanks, Ram. Okay. Thanks very much for joining this episode. Hopefully we'll have some, I'll round up some presentations, but I thought it was really good to have this discussion. Really interesting, some interesting information on V2 versus V3. Thank you, Stephan. I may reach out to you with some questions later. Everyone, be calm, be kind, be safe, carry on. And I'll hopefully see you all in a month. Bye.
Thanks, Troy. Bye all.